Hey guys, today I'll show you a fantasy thriller TV series named Land of Tanabata, Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins with Nan, a university senior about to graduate. While his classmates are busy searching for jobs, he remains absorbed in his unique ability. Ever since childhood, he has had this strange power. Though it only allows him to puncture through 7 thin layers of paper, he is proud of it. After all, his grandfather spent his life training just to puncture through a few millimeters of a kitchen knife. One day, a junior student approached Nan with a letter, saying that a professor named Marukami wanted to see him. Nan was confused since he had never interacted with the professor before. Nevertheless, he followed the address to the professor's office. However, the professor wasn't there. Instead, the professor's teaching assistant informed him that the professor was out on business. Feeling a little disappointed, Nan was about to leave when one of the students stopped him. The student had seen videos showcasing Nan's ability and begged him to demonstrate it live. Nan agreed and drew a cross on a glass cup. After chanting and shouting, a perfectly round hole appeared at the center. The two students were wide-eyed with shock, while the TA looked even more astonished. It turned out that the absent Professor Marukami possessed a similar ability. The TA then pulled a glass cup out of her bag, which had an even larger hole in it. This cup had been sent to the university by the professor's wife. Apparently, Professor Marukami had vanished without a trace after obsessively practicing his ability at home. His wife believed the disappearance was related to a research project he had been working on, and she asked the university to help find him. The TA speculated that the professor had encountered trouble. He was a specialist in geography and anthropology, and his latest research centered on his hometown, Marukami Village. According to legend, the village was home to a shrine priest who betrayed the local feudal lord centuries ago. Enraged, the lord sent 3,000 soldiers to destroy the village. The village's strategic location, Marukami Mountain, with its flat summit surrounded by 7 peaks, made it a natural fortress. Yet, under the priest's leadership, a handful of villagers allegedly wiped out the invading forces entirely. Scholars who know this history believe it is exaggerated, but Professor Marukami took the story as truth and recently returned to his hometown to investigate, only to disappear mysteriously. The TA, connecting Nan's unusual ability to the professor's, speculated that Nan and the professor might share a common ancestry, both descending from prominent families in Marukami Village. Nan had never considered such a possibility until the TA showed him a photograph of the professor. For some inexplicable reason, Nan felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if their bloodline resonated. The TA grew excited and asked Nan to accompany her to Marukami Village to find the missing professor. At first, Nan was hesitant. When he returned home, he called his family to inquire about their roots. He learned that his branch of the family had moved out of Marukami Village 120 years ago and knew nothing about its history. Meanwhile, in the offices of Marukami Village's construction company, a manager was organizing documents when he heard a sudden pop behind him. Curious, he turned to check, only to find a round hole in the window. As he instinctively reached out to touch it, another pop sounded, and his arm disappeared into thin air. Moments later, the manager inexplicably died in his office. The bizarre incident immediately caught the attention of the news media. However, other than the hole in the window, there were no clues or suspicious evidence left at the scene. Watching the news, the TA and her companions immediately thought of Professor Marukami. The strange hole resembled his ability perfectly. Realizing the urgency, Nan decided to join the TA and her group on a journey to Marukami Village. The next afternoon, the group of 4 arrived at the isolated mountain village. Besides Nan and the TA, 2 of Professor Marukami's students accompanied them. As soon as they left the train station, they were greeted by the sight of Marukami Mountain, its flat peak towering majestically. According to locals, the mountain held an irreplaceable sacred significance. Dividing into 2 groups, they began asking around about the professor's whereabouts. Yet, to their surprise, every villager gave the same response. They claimed they had never seen such a person. After a fruitless afternoon, Nan stepped into a coffee shop and noticed a poster announcing a 7-day Tanabata festival in the village. While he was still processing the surprise, the waitress, named Sachiko, brought his coffee. Suddenly, Nan's heart raced, just as it had when he first met Professor Marukami. There was an inexplicable sense of shared bloodline resonance. The bespectacled student teased him, saying it looked more like love at first sight. At that moment, they overheard some customers at the next table talking about a teacher. Intrigued, the bespectacled student rushed over to ask if they were talking about Professor Murakami. The group fell silent and warily denied it, explaining that the teacher was a role in the festival. During casual chatter, however, Nan's surname came up. At that point, their attitude shifted dramatically. They treated Nan like a revered figure, much to his bewilderment. Even back at the inn, he still felt like he was floating from the bizarre treatment. Things escalated further that evening when the village chief himself paid them a visit, personally inviting them to a banquet. The villagers' sudden warmth left Nan stunned. During their conversation, the TA's earlier speculation was confirmed. Nan's family was indeed a branch of the Murakami lineage. Within the village, that lineage still held immense prestige. The villagers began referring to Nan as the young lord and cautiously asked if he possessed supernatural abilities. Shy but proud, Nan nodded, ready to demonstrate his power. Before he could, however, a group of police officers suddenly appeared to flex their muscles. They were investigating a murder that had occurred the previous day. Apparently, a construction company had planned to transform Murakami Mountain into a golf course, which was met with overwhelming resistance from the villagers. The loudest protesters had now become key suspects, drawing police scrutiny. The village chief, however, firmly dismissed the police, claiming they had no evidence. Although the group attempted to continue drinking and enjoying the evening, the atmosphere was now tense. Early the next morning, Nan and the others climbed the mountain, speculating that Professor Murakami may have visited the site. However, upon reaching the summit, they found no clues, only 7 distinctively shaped stones standing in the center. Returning to the inn empty-handed, Nan encountered an unexpected visitor. It's Sachiko, the waitress from the cafe. Without hesitation, she asked him if he was one of the reachable ones. Seeing Nan's confusion, she rephrased if he could use his supernatural ability. Realizing what she meant, Nan eagerly demonstrated his power, piercing a drink can. Sachiko visibly relaxed and warned him to be cautious around the village residents before leaving abruptly. Unbeknownst to them, the innkeeper secretly picked up the phone and confidently told someone on the other end that Nan is one of the reachable ones. That day marked the start of the Tanabata festival. The TA and the group strolled through the lively food stalls, where they happened to spot Sachiko in the crowd. With lingering questions, Nan eagerly approached her sexy body. Sachiko, seemingly fond of him, divulged the village's hidden secrets. In the ancient Murakami clan, certain individuals were born with the supernatural ability to pierce holes. These individuals were called the reachable ones. Including Nan, the village currently had 6 such individuals. Only those capable of opening the window could serve as the village shrine priests. However, Nan was still oblivious to the significance of this phrase, nor did he inquire further about its meaning. As they spoke, a bearded man nearby was harassed by a group of delinquents, possibly because his beard was too handsome. The leader mockingly removed his hat, only to reveal a perfectly round orb embedded in the man's head. Startled, the delinquents turned to leave but were swiftly struck down by the man's supernatural ability. Not far away, the TA and the others noticed a commotion and turned to see a sudden firelight glowing from the back mountain. Realizing something, the TA exclaimed that the true festival was happening elsewhere. Urging the bespectacled student to follow, they hurriedly climbed Murakami Mountain again. Nearing the summit, they saw a group of people in white robes rhythmically waving torches, seemingly performing a ritual to honor a deity. Once the robed figures departed, the TA and the bespectacled student rushed to the center of the summit, only to find that one of the 7 stones was now missing. Before they could process this discovery, the white-robed figures returned. When 2 strangers broke into the area, the white-clad men wasted no time surrounding them and attacking in turn. It wasn't until they heard the TA's shout that the leader of the group pulled off his hat, revealing himself to be the old village chief. He explained that they had mistaken the strangers for saboteurs trying to disrupt the festival. After repeatedly confirming that the 2 hadn't seen anything unusual, the village chief ordered their release. Although the bespectacled students' injuries weren't severe, they couldn't shake the fear lingering in their hearts. It wasn't just the bizarre festival ceremony. Earlier, when they had asked the villagers about Professor Murakami's whereabouts, the evasive looks in their eyes suggested something was being deliberately hidden. The TA decided to call off the investigation. Early the next morning, she bought train tickets for Nan and the others, sending them back to school while she chose to stay behind and continue her inquiries alone. Not long after the group separated, the bearded man with supernatural powers showed up to flex his beard at the inn. Heading straight to the second floor, he found that Nan had already left. Using his powers, he stopped the innkeeper from making a phone call and then obtained Nan's registration details from the inn's records. Meanwhile, Nan had just returned to school when the bearded man came looking for him. Introducing himself as Sachiko's brother and calling himself Takashi, he quickly put Nan at ease. At Takashi's request, Nan demonstrated his supernatural ability. Upon seeing the fingernail-sized hole, Takashi scoffed and told him to stop yelling so dramatically when activating his powers. He then demonstrated the correct way to use them. Raising his hands slightly and focusing his attention, a pitch-black sphere began to grow larger and larger. Nan watched in astonishment, completely dumbfounded. Just as he was about to touch the sphere, Takashi stopped him. He warned that the sphere would consume anything of the same volume that came into contact with it. The reason Nan's holes were so small was that they used up their energy the moment they formed. Doubting this, Takashi instructed him to focus again. A small black sphere appeared, but Takashi quickly interrupted it. He explained that reachable ability refers to reaching through the window to retrieve something not belonging to this world. Nan pondered these words deeply. When he tried again, his progress was evident, and the sphere grew larger than before. Surprised, Takashi ran off to fetch a bucket of water, interrupting Nan's spell just in time. Excited by his progress, Nan didn't notice the strange look in Takashi's smile. Upon returning to his dormitory, he immediately shared the good news with Sachiko, only to be warned to stay away from Takashi. That night, Takashi called Nan, asking for a favor. At the same time, 2 more strangers entered the cafe in Marukami village. The cafe owner immediately reported the matter to the village chief, and the same group of villagers convened once again. They decided to warn everyone not to say too much. Clearly, they were hiding something. Around this time, the TA received an unexpected call. It was from the long-missing Professor Marukami, who was sounding frantic and said cryptically that the window has opened and he may never be able to come back. He then urged his TA to leave quickly, warning that something major was about to happen. In a conference hall somewhere in Tokyo, a politician was delivering a passionate speech when, in the hallway just beyond the wall, a man in a hat pressed both hands against the surface. Moments later, a black sphere appeared in the middle of the hall. Curious, the politician reached out to touch it, and half his body vanished in an instant. He was publicly killed by a mysterious black sphere. While the incident's spread was limited due to behind-the-scenes efforts, Marukami Village, regarded as the birthplace of black hole powers, immediately viewed this as their greatest crisis yet. The village chief even sought out the true leader of the village, the high priest, who forbade anyone from using their powers outside the village, as the black hole was considered a deadly weapon. However, this generation had 2 rule breakers. One was Takashi, considered a small-time troublemaker, while the other was Tanomu, a name the villagers spoke of in fear. Only he could create such enormous black holes, capable of instantly killing the politician. Yet the high priest remained puzzled, wondering why Tanomu would do this since he knows the village rules better than anyone. Around this time, Nan received another request for help from Takashi. Thinking of Takashi as a half-teacher, he found it hard to refuse. But when he arrived at the meeting place, he was stunned to realize that Takashi had asked him to serve as a demonstration guest for the Supernatural Abilities Association. On stage, formally dressed, Nan stood under the spotlight as the host introduced him. With both hands raised, Nan created a pitch-black sphere that appeared to hover in midair. The audience gasped, eyes wide with disbelief. The moment a mannequin touched the sphere, its body was instantly severed. The stunned crowd erupted into thunderous applause. Nan reveled in the feeling of being admired, thrilled that his powers finally had a purpose. To Nan's surprise and delight, the host pulled out a thick wad of cash, calling it his appearance fee for the day and inviting him to perform for the next few days. This, however, was Takashi's true intention all along. By showcasing Nan's supernatural abilities, they attracted a flood of new members, allowing Takashi and the host to pocket the membership fees. Meanwhile, Nan, who was putting in the most effort, received a pitifully small reward. Unbeknownst to him, he had unwittingly become nothing more than a low-level worker. Amidst his excitement, Nan noticed a small red dot had appeared on his forehead. Thinking it was just a regular pimple, he shrugged it off, unaware that this was the price of using special powers. Seasoned supernatural users from Marukami Village had red dots so numerous they looked like they were about to burst. After days of back-to-back performances, Nan had gained considerable popularity. Just as he was reveling in the adoration of his growing fan base, a younger schoolmate suddenly dragged him into the school library. Awkwardly, she pulled out her phone and played a recording. It turned out she had accidentally overheard a conversation between Takashi and the host and recorded the entire exchange. Only then did Nan realize he had been used as Takashi's cash cow. Hearing them mock him as foolish hit a nerve. He stormed off to confront Takashi, giving him a polite yet furious scolding, saying that he had fully awakened to the truth. His powers were never meant for such petty exploitation. Takashi called Nan an ungrateful traitor. Nan didn't argue back. Instead, he bowed deeply to express gratitude for Takashi's guidance before walking away for good. Meanwhile, Tanomu, a senior supernatural user, arrived at a luxurious estate led by a man dressed in black. The estate belonged to the wealthy patron who had hired Tanomu to assassinate the politician. Fascinated by Tanomu's ability to create black holes, the patron asked for a live demonstration. Tanomu, however, saw through his true motives immediately. This patron, a man with significant influence in both business and politics, had been secretly gathering talented individuals for his own purposes. The man didn't deny it and pressed Tanomu to remove his hat so they could discuss matters further. When Tanomu refused, the patron, irritated, clapped his hands. Guards with guns rushed toward the room, but before they could enter, Tanomu calmly spread his hands, sending small orbs flying toward their foreheads. In an instant, the guards collapsed, lifeless. The stunned patron staggered back in shock, only to watch as Tanomu finally removed his hat, revealing a face that was nothing short of monstrous. To his credit, the patron recovered quickly. If anything, he was even more intrigued. Collaborating with someone like Tanomu would certainly prove interesting. When asked about the construction company murders, Tanomu admitted openly that he was responsible, explaining that the company had violated Marukami Village's interests. Though he had left the village, his heart still remained tethered to his homeland. Meanwhile, Nan, now jobless, was wallowing in the despair of repeated failures to find employment. Suddenly, cries of panic erupted from a crowd in the town square. A child had been accidentally locked inside a car by his careless mother. As onlookers debated how to smash the window and save the child, Nan pushed through the crowd. Without hesitation, he activated his powers, creating a small hole in the car window. The door finally opened, and the child was saved. The grateful mother bowed repeatedly in thanks, and Nan experienced a fulfillment unlike anything he had felt before. At last, he had found the true purpose of his supernatural powers. By sheer coincidence, someone filmed the entire rescue and uploaded it online, where it quickly went viral. The viewers buzzed with curiosity, speculating about the identity of this mysterious hero with the whole power. However, Takashi, still seething with resentment toward Nan, couldn't stand to see him bask in the limelight. With a sinister grin, he hatched a devious plan. The next morning, numerous plaques on government buildings across the city mysteriously appeared with holes of various sizes. Speculation spread like wildfire. People thought this was the work of the whole hero. Only the Marukami villagers knew that this could only be Takashi's doing. The village's high priest, furious and heartbroken, declared that this disgraceful outcast was now exposing their supernatural powers to the world and might bring about the village's ruin. In desperation, he called for Professor Marukami, hoping the professor could resolve the growing crisis. To their surprise, the long-missing professor had been hiding in the mountains all along. However, with more pressing matters at hand, he declined to leave and entrusted the task to Sachiko instead. Back in Tokyo, ever since the rescue incident, Nan's abilities had reached astonishing new heights. His classmates discovered that the black holes could make any object disappear and, ever enterprising, set up a commercial service platform. Their pitch was eco-friendly and hassle-free waste disposal. If other supernatural users caught wind of how Nan was squandering his powers, they'd probably cry themselves into oblivion. At that moment, the younger schoolmate noticed something strange. Nan's forehead bump seemed to have grown larger, though he still brushed it off as nothing. Meanwhile, on the school field, the TA unexpectedly encountered Sachiko, whom she had seen several times in Marukami Village. Sachiko brought a handwritten letter from Professor Marukami himself, apologizing for not being able to meet in person. This left the TA deeply disappointed. The letter contained no mention of the professor's true intentions. Recalling a previous phone call, she asked Sachiko what opening the window really meant. After a long silence, Sachiko finally replied that it's a terrible dream, one that many people in the village have shared. At that moment, Nan arrived, having received an urgent message. When Sachiko saw the circular bump on his forehead, her gaze shifted awkwardly. She quickly changed the subject, explaining her reason for being there. She and the village chief were searching for her troublemaker brother, Takashi. Meanwhile, Takashi's partner, the host, had just entered a garage when he was suddenly stopped by two police officers. The authorities had linked him to the black holes that had damaged public property. During the struggle, there was a sudden pop, and to his horror, both officers vanished into thin air. Wide-eyed, the host barely had time to react before a massive orb barreled straight toward him. Unaware of the trouble brewing, Takashi was basking in the adoration of his loyal members. He had promised to teach anyone how to use the hole-creating ability, provided they paid enough. Just then, the village chief stormed in with a group of villagers, warning Takashi not to use supernatural powers outside the village. Predictably, Takashi refused to listen to his old bullshit, rallying his followers to stand against the old geezers. Unable to bear it anymore, Sachiko exposed Takashi's lie, declaring that the hole-creating ability wasn't something just anyone could learn. It required a specific bloodline. Takashi, unfazed, dismissed her words as smelly nonsense. However, Sachiko dropped the ultimate bombshell. She accused her brother of murder. This accusation struck a nerve. Takashi's expression twisted, recalling a dark, unspoken memory. Just as he was about to activate his powers, a loud pop echoed through the room, and a massive circular hole appeared in the window. Tanomu, the most powerful supernatural user, had arrived. Seeing him, Takashi froze like a mouse before a cat, but his followers, still clueless, continued to shout. It wasn't until another hole appeared in the ceiling that the room fell deathly silent. Tanomu explained his purpose. The host had committed a grave offense against Marukami village, and Tanomu had already removed him. Now, he intended to take Takashi back with him. Turning suddenly to Nan, Tanomu prepared to kill him without explanation. Fortunately, Sachiko stepped in just in time, shielding Nan using her sexy body and persuading Tanomu to back down. As Tanomu left with Takashi, Nan watched them go, confused. He turned to the village chief, asking why someone he had only just met wanted him dead. However, the chief was equally baffled. Sachiko, however, seemed to have an idea. She explained that Tanomu was once destined to become the village's high priest and had spent years managing supernatural abilities. To someone like him, unpredictable powers, like Nan's, were best dealt with by simply erasing them. No wonder Takashi acted like a terrified child in his presence. The village chief warned Nan to never reveal his abilities to the outside world. He cautioned that these powers were dangerous enough to upend the world, but Nan disagreed. He believed his ability could be used to benefit humanity. Sachiko, on the other hand, held an even more extreme opinion. She thought powers like these should never exist at all. The three of them argued fiercely, but no resolution was reached, and they parted on bad terms. Later, Sachiko sought out Nan privately to apologize for her earlier outburst. Sensing that she was hiding something, Nan asked what she was so afraid of. Sachiko revealed that she was the one who had opened the window to the other world. She had already glimpsed the terrifying world beyond. To his shock, she removed her coat and turned her back to him, exposing deep, horrific scars. Under Nan's stunned gaze, she begins recounting her tragic and haunting experience. It turns out Sachiko's mother and the mighty Tanomu were once lovers, but the strict rules of the Marukami family forbade their union. Left with no choice, Sachiko's mother married a man from a branch family. Unfortunately, this man was narrow-minded and resentful, constantly suspecting that Takashi was not his biological son. His attitude toward Takashi was cruel and hostile. Unable to watch her son suffer, Sachiko's mother secretly brought Tanomu to teach Takashi how to use his supernatural abilities. However, this only fueled the father's anger further. Takashi, a classic bully, took all the humiliation he endured and vented it on his younger sister. The scars on her back were the result of this abuse. Years later, as Takashi's abilities improved, the tension reached a breaking point. During one of his father's furious tirades, Takashi snapped and killed him with his own hands. In a fit of panic, he even tried to silence Sachiko by killing her as well. Finally, their mother intervened, manifesting an enormous black sphere in her hands, revealing herself to be a powerful supernatural user too. Terrified, Takashi fled the scene. The murder caused an uproar in the village, prompting the intervention of the village's high priest. Since the incident involved the superpower, the priest ordered the village chief to smooth things over with the police and hospital, burying the truth. However, Takashi was banished from Marukami village. Sachiko's tragic life didn't end there. As she grew older, she began to experience recurring wet dreams of falling into a bottomless abyss, the sensation of endless descent accompanied by a crushing sense of helplessness that nearly drove her mad. When she confided in Tanamu, she was stunned to learn that he, too, often had the same dreams. He explained that such dreams were a hallmark of opening the window, an experience shared by many in the village. Tanomu reassured her, promising to find a way to break free from the nightmares. Before Sachiko could take comfort in his words, tragedy struck again. Her mother vanished without a trace. Before disappearing, her mother had bid her a hurried farewell, but no explanation followed. To this day, Sachiko has no idea where her mother went. Listening to her story, Nan was speechless, unable to find the right words to comfort her, but could only use his muscles. Sachiko simply smiled and told him it was fine. The reason she approached Nan was because he seemed to be a naturally optimistic person, someone who always looked on the bright side of things. Watching her walk away, Nan felt both sorrow and a renewed awareness of how terrifying the superpower truly was. The next day, Nan arrived at school early and announced to his classmates that he was canceling the garbage cleanup project. He believed that his supernatural abilities shouldn't be used so frivolously. Yet, in his odd way of thinking, Nan quickly found himself an internship as a janitor. Perhaps deep down, he felt that cleaning up was his true calling. To his surprise, the seemingly ordinary cleaning company he joined was run by an unexpected philosophical manager. The manager spoke of cleaning as the foundation of culture, claiming that the world was filled with filth and negativity, and it was the noble work of cleaners to restore balance and eliminate despair. Fresh to the working world, Nan found himself bewildered but strangely inspired. After a long day, he returned home exhausted and fell into a deep sleep. Suddenly, he felt his body sinking into his bed, and the surrounding light dimmed sharply. Nan found himself in a dark, endless void with no ground to stand on as his body continued to fall uncontrollably. Ahead, a white speck of light appeared. To his shock, he saw Sachiko also falling and wearing an expression of stunned disbelief. She screamed at him not to come closer. Before he could react, a massive door slowly opened in front of him. The next moment, Nan jolted awake, falling out of his bed. It was just a dream, or so it seemed. Little did he know that the door he had seen led to the terrifying world beyond the window. The scene shifted to the central police station. The chaos caused by Tanomu at the Association of Supernatural Abilities had led to everyone being brought in for questioning. As dawn approached, a hungry and exhausted young schoolgirl found the detective. The two shared instant noodles and struck up a casual conversation about the black hole ability. The schoolgirl revealed that she had personally witnessed this strange and powerful ability, while the detective mentioned that several mysterious cases he was investigating also involved the black spheres. Seeing the connection, the two decided to team up and uncover the truth. Together, they gathered news reports from the past few months. There were cases of cars vanishing into thin air, and even more bizarre, an entire passenger plane had disappeared without a trace. It didn't take long for them to identify a pattern. The missing objects were growing larger and larger in scale. Among all the supernatural users the schoolgirl had seen, only Tanamu possessed the power to create something of this magnitude. As the target entered the building, the detective prepared to call for police reinforcements. But the young schoolgirl could wait no longer and charged straight inside. At that moment, Tanamu had already brought Takashi to the second-floor window. From a distance, they saw a politician stepping out of a car surrounded by aides. With a wave of his hands, Tanamu summoned an enormous black sphere, and the next instant, the politician vanished into thin air. Takashi guessed that Tanamu had been hired to eliminate a political rival, but he couldn't understand why his idol would stoop to working for people like that. Tanomu, however, had his reasons. He wreaked such havoc to prove to the villagers that there were no gods in this world, none at all. Tanomu declared that the annual Tanabata festival ceremony is completely meaningless, though Takashi could only half understand his words. Just then, the bodyguards hired by Tanomu's patron entered the room, dragging two unconscious figures behind them. It was the young schoolgirl and the detective. The two had been knocked out before they could even get close to Tanamu, defeated by the bodyguards protecting the area. Takashi recognized the schoolgirl, but didn't dare plead with Tanamu, fearing it would only make things worse for her. Meanwhile, Nan received a new cleaning assignment. The tenant of an office had skipped town with all the funds, and Nan's task was to clear out the remaining junk by the end of the day. Alone in the office, Nan was about to cheat with his supernatural powers when he noticed a note on a wooden clock telling him to handle it with care. It seemed the clock had been dearly cherished by the tenant. Moved, Nan approached the philosophical manager and asked if he could save the clock. The manager promised to check with the company and asked why Nan cared so much. Nan explained that not all garbage was truly worthless. This gave the manager a perfect opportunity to deliver more of his wisdom. He said in this bustling city, negative energy, arrogance, laziness, selfishness accumulates like dirt and grime. Their job is to clean and counteract this negativity with positivity. Cleaning isn't just a chore, it's a force for good. Hearing this, Nan felt as if he had suddenly understood something deeper. Perhaps this was the true purpose of his supernatural powers. At that moment, both of them instinctively looked up at the sky. A massive black sphere floated silently overhead, drifting past them and continuing toward the city's tallest skyscraper. Seconds later, a thunderous explosion rang out as half the building was obliterated. There was no doubt, only Tanomu could have caused such destruction. The sight sent ordinary citizens screaming and fleeing in all directions, but Nan fought against the tide, determined to find the person responsible. The next thing he knew, he was in a nightmarish scene that felt like an ancient battlefield littered with corpses. When he woke up, Nan was dizzy and disoriented, unsure of what had happened. News of the Black Sphere attack spread quickly, though only the Marukami villagers understood what was really going on. Meanwhile, Nan woke again from another dream of falling into the abyss. He headed to work early the next morning, only to receive some unexpected bad news. Due to the unexplained Black Sphere incident, officials had decided to suspend all business operations until further notice. The cleaning company was no exception, leaving Nan no choice but to return home and wait. Elsewhere, the professor's TA was deeply concerned about the attack. She even called the village priest to inquire about the situation. But the priest, of course, refused to divulge any details, simply insisting that the Black Sphere incident had nothing to do with Takashi. He said firmly that Takashi isn't capable of something like this. The TA wasn't convinced. She sensed there was more to the story and decided to return to Marukami village herself. When Nan arrived home, he was startled to see Takashi breaking down his door. Furious, Takashi demanded to know whether Tanomu was behind the Black Sphere attack. Without hesitation, Nan admitted that Tanomu had claimed responsibility and warned that even larger incidents might follow if his goals weren't achieved. Takashi had come to say goodbye, telling Nan grimly that he might disappear for a while. He asked him to deliver his apologies to his sister. Nan, still bewildered, couldn't shake the feeling that Takashi was heading toward his own death. Before leaving, Takashi handed him a slip of paper. Written on it was the location where the schoolgirl and the detective were being held. It turned out that, after being captured, the pair hadn't been killed by Tanamu, but their situation wasn't much better. The patron's men had locked them up in an abandoned factory, awaiting further orders from their superiors. Upon learning that the young schoolgirl was in danger, Nan couldn't sit idly by. When he arrived at the address on the note, the bodyguards had already received orders from their patron to silence any witnesses. The mustached leader, unwilling to get his hands dirty, decided to force the detective to kill the schoolgirl first. Just as the trigger was about to be pulled, the leader's phone rang. A subordinate reported that Tanamu intended to sever ties with their patron. Panicked, the leader and his men quickly left the scene, leaving one bodyguard behind to deal with the two captives. Nan, having just arrived, knew this was his chance. He rolled a small orb, using the sound to lure the remaining bodyguard away. As he moved to rescue the schoolgirl, he was caught off guard. Another bodyguard had been hiding in the shadows. In a moment of desperation, the detective tried to disarm him, but failed to seize the gun. Sensing the imminent danger, Nan instinctively summoned a black sphere. The bodyguard fell to the ground, injured, and Nan, acting on impulse, prepared to finish him off. The schoolgirl suddenly shouted, snapping Nan back to his senses. Horrified, he pushed the sphere aside, letting it collide harmlessly with a nearby pillar. Shaken, he realized he had nearly taken a life. With no time to waste, the three fled the abandoned factory, only relaxing once they were sure no one was in pursuit. It was then that Nan noticed the swelling on his forehead had grown larger. The reckless events left him rattled and deeply uneasy. Meanwhile, under the mustached leader's guidance, Tanomu once again met with the elderly patron. Tanomu had come to settle accounts and sever ties, deeming the assassination tasks far too trivial for his talents. Even the patron now seemed terrified, openly admitting that Tanomu was as dangerous as a nuclear weapon. Yet before the patron could drive away, a blinding white light flashed in the sky, and a massive circular void appeared in the heart of the city. The supernatural Tanomu unleashed his ultimate ability, creating a wide hole in the middle of Tokyo. Everything within the void, buildings and residents alike, vanished without a trace. The shocking incident spread rapidly across news and social media. Some speculated it was a terrorist attack, but the police were at a loss. They couldn't identify the culprit, let alone explain the method. Officials urged citizens to stay home until the truth could be determined. Early the next morning, Nan packed his bags and rode his bicycle through the deserted streets. Shops were closed, and only the occasional police car passed by, urging any lingering pedestrians to return home. The once bustling city was eerily quiet. Meanwhile, the TA prepared her own luggage, determined to visit Marukami village to uncover the truth about the black hole attack. Nan, as the village heir, couldn't skip out on the journey. The recently rescued schoolgirl insisted on joining them, intrigued by the supernatural being known as Tanomu. Nan, however, was plagued by doubt. Previously, Takashi had confided in him that Tanomu's destruction was aimed at ending a recurring nightmare. Nan had also experienced the terrifying dream, but he couldn't understand how chaos and destruction were supposed to stop it. Though usually laid back and indifferent, even Nan couldn't ignore the countless innocent lives lost to Tanomu's abilities. He was also determined to uncover the truth about the secrets lurking in Marukami village. The group arrived at the village, where the village chief and a group of villagers were already waiting to greet them. The villagers had previously been hosted by the TA during their trip to Tokyo in search of Takashi. This time, the TA wasted no time and got straight to the point. She bombarded the villagers with questions, asking why so many villagers had strange dreams and what opening the window meant. To her frustration, the villagers remained completely silent, as if they had all agreed beforehand not to say a word. The TA's patience finally snapped, and she lashed out in anger, worried that another black hole incident might occur. The village chief hesitated before stammering that these were village secrets that couldn't be shared with outsiders. Furious, Nan pounded the floor. He was enraged by the villagers' apathetic attitude. To him, they were simply burying their heads in the sand, hiding behind outdated customs and refusing to think for themselves. This disaster had happened precisely because someone from Marukami village had broken the so-called rules. In Nan's eyes, Tanomu wasn't some descendant of noble lineage, nor was he a revered master. He was nothing more than a murderer. His blunt words caused an uproar among the villagers. To them, the Marukami family's supernatural powers made them divine beings beyond reproach. Only the village chief retained some semblance of reason. He promised to arrange a meeting the next day with the village priest and would also invite Professor Marukami to join the conversation. The TA's heart skipped a beat. At long last, she would finally meet her mentor she had been searching for. When dawn broke, Nan and the others emerged from the inn. The village chief informed them that the priest's residence was about a half-hour's walk away. The TA was a bit disappointed, asking why the professor isn't here. The chief explained that the professor would meet them directly at the residence later. Not long after, Sachiko, who appeared delicate and frail, joined the group. The party set off, chatting as they went and pausing occasionally to admire the scenery along the way. However, unbeknownst to them, someone had already arrived at the priest's residence ahead of them. It was none other than the root of all the chaos, Tanomu. Takashi, Tanomu's nervous sidekick, looked uneasy. After all the commotion they had caused, he couldn't imagine how the villagers or the priest would react. Tanomu, however, remained expressionless, exuding the aura of a true master. The servants in the residence, upon seeing him, reacted as if they had seen a ghost. In a panic, they woke the priest from his piggy sleep. When the priest laid eyes on Tanomu and Takashi, he was momentarily stunned. Tanomu wasted no time, declaring bluntly that no matter how far he traveled, he could never escape the hold this land had on him. Killing the developers who had attempted to exploit Marukami Mountain was proof enough. This time, Tanomu announced that he had returned to overturn the very foundation of the village and expose the ignorance that had plagued it for centuries. Furious, the priest denounced Tanomu as a madman, but Tanomu's mind was made up. His visit was simply to deliver this message in person. As he stepped out the door, Tanomu suddenly paused. The moment he opened the wooden gate, a team of special soldiers lying in wait raised their weapons. They were most likely sent by Tanomu's former patron. There was no way the patron would let a human weapon like Tanamu slip from their control. Yet Tanamu remained unshaken, his composure befitting a true master. He slipped into a side room in the back courtyard and began assigning tasks to Takashi for dealing with the attackers. Just as they were about to charge forward, the soldiers unexpectedly turned their guns on the priest. The priest managed to release a black sphere of energy, but Tanomu's wide-area attack skill immediately followed. Despite his efforts, the priest couldn't dodge the incoming bullets and fell to the ground. Tanomu stared in disbelief as the priest's body collapsed. After a long moment of silence, he let out a quiet sigh and left with Takashi. As the two stepped outside, another heavily armed squad surrounded them. Tanomu calmly gathered his energy, and the moment the soldiers moved closer, he unleashed a rapid, wide-scale attack that wiped them out. At the corner of the courtyard, Tanomu set up numerous spherical traps, catching the unsuspecting soldiers off guard. Takashi clapped his hands in admiration, oblivious to an enemy's dying counterattack. Takashi touched the wound on his body, his expression a mix of disbelief and regret. He collapsed to the ground, unable to accept his fate. Meanwhile, Nan and the others heard the sound of gunfire echoing from the priest's residence. Sensing something was terribly wrong, they sprinted toward the source of the noise. Upon arrival, they were met with the sight of countless fallen black-clad soldiers and the revered priest lying in a pool of diabetic blood, barely clinging to life. With his final breath, the priest told them that Tanamu had brought the blades of the outside world into their village and they must find a way to stop him. Before he could finish, the priest exhaled one last time and fell silent forever. Sachiko felt a deep sense of foreboding and decided to explore elsewhere with Nan. At that moment, Tanomu had already carried Takashi to a narrow path in the rear courtyard. Takashi's internal injuries were severe, and it was clear he wouldn't last much longer. Tanomu decided to grant him release. Takashi, enduring the pain, asked Tanomu to pass on his apologies to his sister Sachiko. Realizing that Takashi had drawn his final breath, Tanomu gently lowered his hands and fell silent. Before long, Nan and the others followed the trail of bodies and finally found Takashi lying lifeless by the roadside. Sachiko walked forward in a daze, but as she approached her brother's body, her emotions suddenly broke down. Though their sibling relationship had never been strong, Takashi was still Sachiko's only family. There were so many things she hadn't had the chance to say to him. Her heart-wrenching cries echoed through the bamboo forest. Meanwhile, the TA had searched through all the bodies but found no sign of Professor Marukami. Bright red blood smeared the glass window, resembling a blooming crimson rose. In this story, the outside the window frequently mentioned by the villagers refers to an alternate dimension. Marukami Village has two special types of people. The first type, known as the Touchers, can create black spheres with their hands, essentially opening dimensional gateways. The second type, known as the Window Openers, can see into the alternate dimension through dreams. Some villagers only possess one ability. For example, Sachiko is a window opener, while her brother Takashi was merely a toucher. Tanomu, however, possesses both abilities, which is the reason for his unparalleled power. Nan also seems to belong to this dual ability category, though his combat skills are still pitifully weak at present. Nonetheless, his potential for growth is immense. At first, Tanamu may have only wanted to break free from tradition and use his abilities to carve out a place for himself in the outside world. While working for his patron, Tanamu conducted numerous experiments and realized that the black spheres might act as doors or windows capable of sending objects and people into the alternate dimension. This revelation led him to sever ties with his patrons and return to Marukami Village. He told the priest that to overturn the village's very foundation, he intended to unleash his ultimate plan, sending Marukami Mountain out of this world. He might even resort to targeting the village's stubborn elders to achieve his goal of complete upheaval and restoring the village to a state of normalcy. Tanomu also had an audacious theory: intelligent beings might exist in the alternate dimension. Marukami Mountain likely serves a special purpose because its unusual shape could not be naturally formed. This connects back to earlier episodes that mention the village festival, where the villagers worship a deity that may actually be an entity from the alternate dimension. The TA had studied the festival dates closely and discovered that, although the festival dates varied on the Gregorian calendar, they were identical when converted into Marukami Village's unique record-keeping system. This strongly suggests that the system originated from the alternate dimension itself, facilitating communication between the two sides. Otherwise, the festival would lose its significance. Tanomu's earlier rampage in Tokyo was his way of testing whether the beings from the alternate dimension would intervene or punish him, since the ability to create these dimensional openings likely stems from that realm. Why else would only the villagers of Marukami have the potential to awaken such powers? Marukami Mountain appears to be the crucial link between the two worlds. Back to the story, following the intense battle, the county police sealed off the area and issued a gag order to everyone present. Nan and the others stumbled out of the residence, disheartened and still reeling from the events. Suddenly, a car blocked their path. Sachiko's grandmother hurriedly stepped out, explaining that she had come on the orders of the family head to relocate Nan to a safer place. Due to the attack, the village's superhumans had become high-priority protection targets. The TA's heart stirred at this news, and she immediately asked about the family head's identity. After some hesitation, Sachiko's grandmother admitted that the person in question was none other than Professor Marukami, the very man the TA had been searching for. However, he was currently unable to appear in public. Not long after, Nan and Sachiko arrived at a secluded courtyard, specially arranged for the two of them by the professor. Neither of them had expected that in just one day, 2 superhumans had died in the village. Nan believed that it was all caused by Tanomu, while Sachiko thought that death was merely the dissolution of the body, and that the human spirit would live on forever. For her brother, this might not be a bad thing. Sachiko then began to share her experiences. She couldn't remember exactly when it started, but for as long as she could recall, she had been having the same nightmare over and over. She would wake up in the morning in an empty house, searching for her family, and while passing a hillside, she would inexplicably fall into an endless abyss. Sachiko could only feel herself plummeting downward through endless darkness, but at the far distance, she could distinctly see a strange figure waving at her. Suddenly, her hand was firmly gripped, and she realized it was Nan who had interrupted her recounting. Just imagining such a scene was terrifying, and he couldn't bear to let Sachiko relive it. Nan suddenly remembered the apologies Takashi had asked him to convey to his sister. Perhaps in that moment, Sachiko had found complete peace, and the sibling rivalry between them had dissipated into nothingness. At that moment, the sound of a police siren pierced the air outside. The police had classified the previous day's attack as a serial murder case and urged the villagers to stay home until the killer was caught. But the Marukami villagers were far from obedient. The village chief gathered everyone who had opened their windows, instructing them to meet in the central park that evening. Meanwhile, a junior from the dining hall secretly recorded the entire conversation on her phone. After hearing the contents, the TA speculated that something significant was about to happen in the village. The attack the previous day had not even been reported officially. The junior tried posting the information online, but in no time the post was deleted. It felt as though an invisible net was enveloping the entire village. Perhaps tonight's villagers' meeting would be about how to respond to this encroaching net. In any case, they had to go. Meanwhile, Nan, who had just finished breakfast in the secluded courtyard, mentioned wanting to visit the inn to check on the TA and the others. However, Sachiko's grandmother insisted he stay put for the day because tonight there was an important opportunity that would determine the future of Marukami Village. Just then, the doorbell rang. Sachiko's grandmother opened the door to find the county police outside. Instinctively, she tried to shut the door, but the police forced their way in. Fortunately, Sachiko reacted quickly, and she led Nan out the back door to escape unnoticed. The police seemed to be looking for someone, but they came up empty-handed. By the time Nan reached the foot of the mountain, he was feeling frustrated. Clearly, they were looking for Tanamu, so why did he have to flee like a dog? Sachiko reasoned that, like Tanamu, Nan was also a superhuman. Nan's face was full of mockery, wondering if the sole purpose of Marukami Village was to hide superhumans. He decided to attend the village meeting that night. However, when nightfall came, the TA and the others had already arrived first. From a distance, they saw the villagers facing off with the county police. The meeting hadn't even started yet, and the police had already disrupted it. The lead officer took the opportunity to announce their objective, to hand over the terrorist Tanamu. The village chief shot back sarcastically, saying he should focus on capturing the killer of the priest first. As soon as he finished speaking, several cars came speeding toward them, and the armed men inside turned out to be the ones responsible for killing the priest. It became clear that they were working with the police and had been authorized by some influential figure. The group's leader got straight to the point, saying the authorities had confirmed that the recent spherical attacks were all orchestrated by Tanomu. He demanded that everyone provide any clues they had to help capture this terrorist. The villagers immediately became agitated. After all, Tanomu was a direct descendant of the family head, and they would rather die than betray him. The man quickly grabbed a rifle and fired several shots into the air. The scene finally quieted down. Seizing the moment, the man warned that Tanomu posed a threat to the safety of the earth and urged the villagers to seriously consider whether they wanted to help him. As tensions escalated, Nan suddenly emerged from behind. To ease the atmosphere, he proposed a compromise. Let Tanomu come out and meet everyone. After all, no one knew the true motive behind his attacks. The villagers, however, were deeply worried. If Tanomu appeared, he would likely be shot on sight. Seeing the crowd growing more agitated, Nan quickly formed a small sphere with his ability. He felt that this power wasn't just for killing and destruction. It really depended on how one chose to use it. Tanomu had chosen the path of destruction, but that didn't mean the ability was inherently tied to black holes. Just then, a voice interrupted Nan. It was the new priest, Professor Marukami, who strongly agreed with Nan's view. The powers of superhumans and the traditions of the village were like invisible shackles, imposing a huge burden on everyone in the village. The professor decided it was time for a change and planned to have a serious conversation with the soldiers. The two sides moved to a meeting room to begin negotiations. Professor Marukami laid out his demands. He promised that superhumans would never leave the mountain village, but in exchange, the authorities could not enter the village freely. In return, he would do his best to help capture Tanomu. The village chief was about to speak when the professor quickly interrupted, insisting that this was the only way to protect the village. The leading man reluctantly agreed to the proposal. However, he was curious about what Tanomu's next target would be. The professor solemnly stated that he intended to make Marukami Mountain disappear. This piqued the curiosity of the TA and the others. What was so special about Marukami Mountain, and how did the professor know about it? Just then, Nan brought a message saying the professor had something to show them. The TA felt a surge of excitement. Finally, the professor had thought of them. The next morning, the TA and the others eagerly arrived at the agreed location. Professor Marukami had been waiting in the meeting room for some time, and in front of him was a model of the village. He began by apologizing for his earlier abrupt departure, explaining that his investigations had uncovered the village's core secrets. Now that he had become the new priest, he felt it was his responsibility to change the village's old customs. He decided to reveal everything he had discovered recently. It all began with the long-standing Tanabata festival. On the surface, it appeared to be a simple 7-day festival held on the summer solstice, but the professor had made a new discovery. He first had his student press his palm onto a blank sheet of paper, then pulled out another sheet with a handprint that had been made in advance. The TA immediately guessed that the handprint belonged to Tanomu, because during the attack a few days ago, he had left a bloodied handprint on the window. The professor placed the two handprints side by side and connected them with a black sphere. The group suddenly understood. This was the Marukami family's ancient magpie flag. It looked as if a strange hand from above was offering some kind of round object to the hand below, and the meaning was now clear. The so-called whole-creating ability must have been a gift from some intelligent being to humanity, and these superhumans would eventually take on the appearance of their benefactors. The round beads on their foreheads, especially Tanomu's mutated face and palm, were the best proof of this. It turned out that the flag pattern already held the hidden origins of everything, but even more astonishing news was yet to come. The professor meticulously studied the topographic map of the Marukami mountain range and noticed a special gap between two peaks. This gap allowed for a rare phenomenon during the 7 days of the summer solstice, where some locations could witness a second sunset. Everyone immediately realized this referred to the 7 sunsets. That was where the name of the Tanabata festival came from. The professor nodded and instructed everyone to stand side by side, facing the light. He began to trace the sun's path during the summer solstice with a light in his hand. As he moved it slowly, the light reflecting off the surrounding peaks formed the shape of the magpie flag. Now it's clear that the so-called black hole superpower likely came from another world, imparted by an intelligent species. Tanomu's current form was probably already very close to that of these beings, which was the price of using the whole-creating ability. It seemed that the Tanabata festival was a way for the two worlds to communicate. Now, it became clear why Tanamu wanted to destroy Marukami Mountain. He aimed to sever the connection between the two worlds and free the Marukami villagers once and for all. Perhaps this would mark the end of the superpowers, but for Tanamu, returning the villagers to a normal life was more important than anything else. He had promised Sachiko that he would find a way to end the nightmares, and with Marukami Mountain gone, that goal could be achieved. Back to the story, the professor finally unraveled the long-standing secret. He marveled at the vast and majestic land sculpture, something that human civilization could never have created. After studying numerous historical texts and folk legends, he speculated that an extraterrestrial civilization had once arrived in Marukami village, and the locals had worshipped them as gods, calling them the Magpie Gods. Records stated that the year the gods arrived, the harvest was always abundant. Looking closely at the shape of Marukami Mountain, it resembled a giant helicopter landing pad, and the torches used during the Tanabata festival resembled navigation lights, clearly designed to welcome the gods' arrival. However, for reasons unknown, the Magpie Gods had not appeared again, yet the festival continued. Whether it was out of hope, reverence, or some other feeling, the villagers remained bound by an invisible chain. Professor Marukami continued gravely, explaining that the Magpie Gods, fearing they might be forgotten, had implanted images of the outside world in the villagers' dreams, making them constantly feel endless fear and loneliness. The young schoolgirl was curious about why they would do such a thing. The professor speculated that the extraterrestrials planned to turn the village into a habitable site or an experimental ground. Each time they visited, they selected outstanding villagers to serve as loyal servants and granted them the whole creating superpower, which helped solidify their control. The implanted fear in the villagers' dreams ensured that Marukami Village became an exclusive community, protecting Marukami Mountain from being destroyed. Everyone soon understood. The special topography of Marukami Mountain had been altered by the Magpie Gods, using sunlight to create the most visible markers of their influence. Yet for reasons unknown, the Magpie Gods had not returned in the hundreds of years since. Perhaps they had abandoned the place, or perhaps they had become extinct. Clearly, Tanamu had also realized the importance of Marukami Mountain. To sever the villagers' connection to the Magpie Gods, destroying the mountain, this conduit between the two worlds, was the simplest and most direct way. However, as the current high priest, Professor Marukami had to consider the immediate crisis facing the villagers, the cold, ruthless soldiers. To rid the village of these forces, he was forced to strike a deal and reveal Tanomu's whereabouts. The special forces had already set up an ambush in a house at the foot of Marukami Mountain, ready to turn Tanamu into Swiss cheese the moment he appeared. Still, the professor wasn't entirely sure, so he had people stationed on the mountain itself, lighting bonfires at night to make Tanamu aware that the villagers were still calling upon the Magpie Gods. But Nan felt conflicted, wondering if this was using the villagers as bait. After the TA and the others learned about the plan, they surprisingly volunteered to stay on Marukami Mountain. Professor Marukami thought it over and eventually agreed to their request. When it was Nan and Sachiko's turn to keep watch that night, the two couldn't help but talk about their future lives. Nan planned to rent a place in a new city and continue his work clearing away garbage. Sachiko was stunned by this strange idea because her life felt bleak, with an invisible chasm always in front of her. The thought of imagining a future seemed like an unattainable dream. At that moment, the man with the goatee, leading a group of Special Forces soldiers, walked up to the bonfire. He was there to confront Professor Marukami, as after days of waiting, they still hadn't seen Tanomu. The man suspected this was just a delay tactic by the professor. He even wondered if Tanamu had already fled the village. The soldiers were nearly driven mad by this situation, and a fierce battle seemed inevitable. But just as tensions reached their peak, one soldier suddenly pointed his gun at his comrade. To everyone's shock, the soldier was actually Tanomu in disguise. The leading man became the lone leader, but his authority was unshaken. He demanded to know if Tanamu realized the consequences of killing him. Tanamu didn't answer, instead sending him to meet Jesus with a single ball. Tanamu believed that these soldiers were merely representatives of an interest group, and that Professor Marukami didn't care about them. The professor, however, asked Tanomu why, if he wanted to destroy Marukami Mountain, he had killed so many innocent civilians. Tanomu patiently explained that he had always wondered if the whole creating ability could truly send people to the outside world. Unfortunately, after countless experiments, he still couldn't find a definitive answer. Then he had an epiphany. If his superpowers reached the level of the magpie gods who had once visited Marukami village, he could reach their world. Over the past few days, Tanomu had been focusing on accumulating his power, and to his surprise, a huge black ball was now floating in the pitch-black night. Its diameter had already exceeded that of Marukami Mountain. Tanomu was certain that such a massive ball could send him to the world of the magpie gods, while also flattening Marukami Mountain in the process. Professor Marukami scolded him, calling him insane because no one was sure that's an entrance. Sachiko suddenly asked if he could take her with him. She had had enough of the endless torment in her dreams. Nan immediately intervened, saying that would be the same as suicide. But Sachiko ignored him and asked if the one reaching out to her in her dreams was him. As she spoke, it was as if she was in the middle of the galaxy. A strange figure slowly raised its arm, and Sachiko instinctively extended her hand. Just as they were about to touch, Nan pulled her heavy body back into reality, scolding her for being so foolish. He said this world was much bigger than she thought, and the unknown was countless. Compared to that, these so-called superpowers and chains meant nothing. So why would anyone risk their life for such things? His words made both Tanomu and Sachiko fall silent. They remembered how Sachiko's mother had once tried to use a black hole to send herself to the outside world. What Tanomu was trying to do now was simply an amplified version of what she had attempted. It turned out that Tanomu had always been obsessed with exploring the outside world because he just wanted to see his beloved again. Watching black balls rise into the air one by one, the professor signaled for everyone to run. No one could stop Tanomu's madness now. Sachiko, pulled by Nan, slowly turned her head. She saw the enormous ball slowly descending. The moment it made contact with Tanomu, brilliant blue light erupted, and the clouds above formed a massive vortex, like a door or window to an unknown world. When everything settled, a huge circular pit appeared at the top of Marukami Mountain. 3 months later, Nan arrived in a new city and set up a flea market. He relied entirely on bartering to exchange for the daily necessities he needed. This allowed things that would have otherwise been discarded to gain new value. This was another way of eliminating waste. In recent times, Nan had stopped using his power, and the round mark on his forehead gradually faded away, almost miraculously. Surprisingly, the TA had also voluntarily resigned from her position and moved to Marukami village to become the professor's life assistant. Nan would occasionally take time out to visit Sachiko, and without the torment of the dreams, the girl's smile had become brighter than before. This marks the end of this drama. The ending is an open one. Whether the black ball truly leads to a dimensional gateway is still unknown. According to the professor's theory, the window openers and the reachers are both methods used by extraterrestrials to ensure the villagers' loyalty and to protect Marukami village as an experimental site. The window openers dream of being in a pitch-black space where the only light comes from the extraterrestrials waving at them. It gives the impression that the aliens are the saviors, hinting that they are the true source of salvation. So, whether the black ball is a gateway or a weapon depends on the perspective of the person considering it. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.